In a quiet suburb outside Chicago, where lawns were trimmed like green carpets and houses stood in polite rows, lived Robert and Eleanor Whitman. Their home was large, too large, really, for two aging people, but it had once been full of noise, arguments, laughter, and slammed doors. Now it echoed. Every sound lingered longer than it should have, as if the walls themselves were reluctant to let go of any reminder that life had once been busy here. Robert was 74. He had worked for 42 years as an engineer, leaving home before sunrise and returning after sunset so his children could have a better future. Eleanor, 71, had been a school librarian, the kind who remembered children's favorite books and slipped encouraging notes into the pages. Together, they raised 3 children, Michael, Susan, and Daniel, teaching them independence, self-confidence, and the belief that they could conquer the world on their own. And they did. That was the problem. Michael lived in Seattle, working for a major tech company. Susan had moved to New York, married, divorced, remarried, and was now raising 2 teenagers while juggling a demanding marketing job. Daniel lived closest, only 2 hours away, but his life revolved around deadlines, promotions, and a constantly buzzing phone. None of them were cruel. None of them had abandoned their parents intentionally, yet Robert and Eleanor spent most days alone. Mornings began quietly. Eleanor woke early, out of habit, even though there was nowhere urgent to go. She brewed coffee for 2, still measuring it as if the children might suddenly appear at the table. Robert read the newspaper, though he often stared past the words. They spoke about practical things, doctor appointments, grocery lists, the weather, but avoided deeper conversations, as if acknowledging their loneliness might make it heavier. Once, Sundays had been sacred. Family dinners, laughter, debates about politics, and stories from the children's lives had filled the house. Now, Sundays were the hardest. Eleanor set the table carefully, then hesitated, removing extra plates. Robert suggested eating in front of the television, pretending it didn't matter. American society had taught their children well. Be independent, don't rely on anyone, build your own life. Those lessons had carried them far, but they had also carried them away. Eleanor tried to stay busy. She volunteered at the local library twice a week, mostly to hear voices and feel needed. Robert worked in the garden even when his knees ached, because the physical pain distracted him from the emotional one. In the evenings, they waited for phone calls that often came late or not at all. When Michael called, it was usually rushed. "Hey, Mom, Dad, just 5 minutes, meeting in 10. You guys okay?" They always said yes. Always, because saying no felt like a burden they didn't want their children to carry. Susan sent photos more than she called, smiling kids, vacations, celebrations. Eleanor saved every picture, showing them proudly to neighbors, while quietly wishing she could hear the laughter in real time. Daniel promised to visit soon, and sometimes he did, once every few months, staying just long enough to fix something in the house and reassure himself that his parents were doing fine. But fine is not the same as fulfilled. One winter, Robert slipped on the ice while shoveling the driveway. He broke his wrist and bruised his pride. At the hospital, Eleanor sat alone in the waiting room, watching families surround their loved ones. She felt invisible. When she called the children, they reacted with concern, but distance. Flights were expensive, work was busy. They checked in by phone, trusting that things would work out. They always did. That, too, was part of the problem. As Robert healed, something in him changed. He became quieter, more withdrawn. One evening, he said softly, "We did everything right, Ellie. So why does it feel like we failed?" Eleanor had no answer. She only reached for his hand. In American society, aging often happened in silence. Old age was something to manage, not share. Nursing homes were efficient, professional, and clean, but often lonely. Independence was celebrated, even when it turned into isolation. Children loved their parents, but love was squeezed between meetings, commutes, and obligations. Spring came, but the house remained quiet. Then, one afternoon, Eleanor didn't wake up from her nap. She passed peacefully, the doctor said. No pain, just a heart that had finally grown tired. The phone calls this time were different. Panic replaced routine. Michael flew in immediately. Susan came 2 days later. Daniel arrived the same night. The house filled again. Voices, tears, regret. They moved through rooms heavy with memories, realizing how much of their parents' lives they had missed. Robert sat in his chair, watching his children grieve. He felt love, yes, but also a deep, aching truth. They had come now because they had to, not because life had allowed them to before. After the funeral, the children talked about next steps: assisted living, selling the house, weekly check-in calls, plans that sounded responsible, organized, and painfully late. Michael hugged his father and said, "Dad, you won't be alone anymore." Robert smiled politely, but inside he wondered why it had taken loss to bring them back. Months later, the children returned to their lives. Robert stayed in the house a little longer, refusing to rush change. He joined a community center for seniors, started telling his story to anyone who would listen, not with bitterness, but with honesty. "I don't blame my children," he would say. "They did exactly what we taught them. I just wish we had also taught them that success means nothing if the people who raised you spend their last years waiting." In the end, Robert learned to fill his days differently. He found companionship in others who shared the same quiet pain, but the emptiness of those rooms never fully disappeared. Because in a society that moves fast, the slowest people are often left behind, not out of cruelty, but out of habit. And that is why in many American homes, old parents sit alone, not unloved, but forgotten in the noise of modern life.